Welcome. This is DA Sports. I'm your host, DASASIN. Thank you. This is episode number 45. Now, in today's episode, we got a couple of things to get into. Of course, we do have to recap the Super Bowl. And then, of course, we are going to get into my top five and worst five NBA rankings as of the end of the day, Tuesday, February 11th. So let's get into it. Okay, so to start, of course, we have to recap the Super Bowl from Sunday between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs were favored by 1.5 points. It actually dropped down to 1 point around the time of kickoff. And as we know from my last episode, I, of course, picked the Chiefs to win because I am a Chiefs fan and felt like they'd be able to pull it out. And, of course, I was terribly wrong. The final score in the game was 40-22. So not only did the Eagles win, but it was a blowout. And in reality, the final score wasn't really indicative of the actual game itself. A lot of the scoring that the Chiefs ended up doing was pretty much in garbage time. It was late in the fourth quarter when the Eagles pretty much already knew they had the game won. So the final score isn't indicative of the game. The game itself was pretty much a blowout by halftime. And it was interesting. So touching on just the game itself, I said that one of the reasons why I wouldn't be surprised if Philadelphia did blow out the Chiefs was because of their D-line. And that rang true. The Philadelphia defensive line completely obliterated the Chiefs' offensive line from the very first play of the game. And they didn't have to blitz at all. I assumed that, it was just going to be Jalen Carter wrecking the game. And he did wreck the game the entire time. But his pressure also led to other people being able to make pressure throughout the game too. So, yeah, like I said, it was complete domination. And I think that definitely set the tone for the entire game. The game got off to like a rocky start. There were some bad calls in the beginning of the game. But after that, like first quarter, it seemed to settle a little bit. But as people who've played the game know, the game is won in the trenches, and this was no exception. The Eagles dominated. Their offensive line dominated. Their defensive line dominated the Chiefs' offensive line, and their offensive line did enough to let the Eagles score the way they needed to. Now, the Chiefs' defensive line was productive. They were getting pressure, but it wasn't enough to overcome what was happening on the other side. So that was definitely the biggest impact on the game itself. And all of that pressure led to Mahomes probably having one of the worst games he's had in his career. Obviously, it being terrible to happen in the Super Bowl. He turned the ball over, I believe, 3 times, one of which was a pick six. And that really kind of swung the momentum. Like, the Eagles already had the momentum, but the pick six really kind of crystallized the idea that this game may be a blowout. And Mahomes pretty much resorted back to what he did a lot earlier in his career, where he was trying to force a big play. He even came out and said it after the game that, that's something that he has to continue to work on because he's trying to force a spark and trying to make up the differential all at once, because there was a time years ago when they were able to do that. And you just can't do that. And the way that, defenses are going to play against the Chiefs where they sit back in coverage, you got to take it little by little. And, it's hard to do when you're getting pressured every single play. This Super Bowl really reminded me of the Super Bowl from 4 years ago when the Chiefs played Tampa Bay. And it was the same scenario where Tampa Bay's D-line was just obliterating the Chiefs' offensive line, and Mahomes was running for his life the entire game. So, very similar scenario. Now, as far as after this game looking forward, from the Eagles' perspective, they could easily be back in the Super Bowl next year. If you think about the way Howie Roseman pulls off trades for other teams' best players, the way he's hit in the draft essentially almost every year, there's nothing for me to think that they can't get back here. Obviously, Saquon is still signed on a long-term contract. Jalen Hurts is still signed on a long-term contract. A.J. Brown isn't going to want to go anywhere. He's signed. Devontae Smith is signed. I believe most of their offensive line is signed. So, I mean, every team has some sense of turnover. They may lose a couple of players here and there. But if you think about the most impactful part of their team, they're all pretty much locked in. So, yeah, I mean, there's nothing to think otherwise that the Eagles can't make it back to the Super Bowl next year, and maybe this is the start of them trying to start their dynasty. So we'll see. Now, on the other side for the Chiefs, they have some crucial decisions to make. Obviously, they dealt with a lot of injuries this year. You know, their number one receiver going into this year didn't play. He only played, I think 4 games before he got hurt, which was Rashee Rice. So hopefully he comes back fully healthy next year. But then the other problem is that he still has a lingering suspension hovering over his head. So he could end up coming back fully healthy next year and then end up being suspended. And we don't know how long the suspension would be. I would guess based on how other suspensions have gone, it'll probably be around 6 games. But if he comes back and then he's suspended for the entire season, then it's 2 seasons in a row where they don't have Rice. I think once Rice gets back, him paired with Worthy, their 2 young receivers will be great. But the problem is the rest of their receiving core is very old. A lot of them are on 1-year deals. Hollywood Brown's on a 1-year deal. Hopkins is on a 1-year deal. So I don't know if any of them are going to come back, especially because they probably can't come back at the price point they're currently getting paid, and they probably could demand more money elsewhere. So it'll be interesting to see what the Chiefs do with their receiving core. It'll also be interesting to see what they do with their offensive line. I would say their third best offensive lineman, Trey Smith, I believe he's at the end of his contract, so they got to make a decision there. And then they definitely got to do something with their tackles. They have 2 younger tackles on the team, but when they tried to give them playing time during the year, they weren't getting the job done, which is why Tooney got bumped out from guard to tackle. Obviously, they don't want Tooney playing tackle the entire season, so they're going to have to do something at tackle. I don't know if that means go after somebody in free agency. I don't know if that means trying to draft a tackle in the first round again, but something's got to give with the offensive line. So definitely those are the 2 spots where are going to be the most pressing. I think also they have to re-sign Nick Bolton, so it's going to be a lot of fluctuation. I did see something being floated around online about the Chiefs being able to save $17 million in cap if they were to cut Travis Kelce. I don't think that's going to happen. Even if you say okay, well, he took a step back this year and he's losing a step, and maybe based on today's productivity, he's not worth the $19 million contract that he's going to have if he were to play next year. From a team's perspective, they make more than that and then some just from him being on the team in terms of popularity. Not only just from the whole Taylor Swift part of it, but just in terms of merch sales and marketing and things like that. Travis Kelce's face and name is very marketable. So if they had to pay him more to keep him, even with this level of productivity, they still would do so. And honestly, I think that once all the receivers get back, I think his productivity won't be as bad as it was this year overall. And I think he still can produce in the playoffs. And I don't think he wants to go out this way. He's a very competitive person, so he's definitely going to want to come back and help this team get back to the Super Bowl again. Okay, so moving on, we got to get into my NBA Top 5 and Worst 5 rankings. Now, these rankings are of as Tuesday, February 11th. So that means after the games from Tuesday, those are included. Anything from today, Wednesday, or when this airs is not going to be included. So just keep that in mind. So to start at number one, of course, we got to go with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Oklahoma City Thunder are 43-9. They currently have the best record in the league. They've been at the or near the top essentially the entire season. I believe the last two rankings they've been at the number one spot, and they continue to prove that they deserve to be there. They still have the greatest point differential of all of the teams in the NBA. If you recall from my last top 5 and worst 5, I believe their point differential was 12.6. Well, guess what? Now, 2 weeks or so later, actually it's a little more than 2 weeks later, it's actually gone up even more. So now their point differential is 13.4 points, which is just crazy. The idea that every game they play, they're winning by an average of 13 points, more than 13 points, is pretty crazy, especially because that also considers their losses. So definite domination, definite proving that they're the number one team in the league. And the part that people seem to keep forgetting is they don't even have their full roster together yet. So imagine exactly what it's going to be when everybody's back at 100%. They're going to be a problem to deal with. And, of course, as a Thunder fan, I'm very happy about that. Now, coming in at number 2, I got to go with the Boston Celtics. Boston Celtics right now are 38-16. Now, the Celtics are another team that has been in the top 5 essentially the entire season. You know, they were at 1 earlier in the season, and then they dropped down. I think they've been as low as like 4 or 5, but always in this top 5, and they keep proving why they're the defending champions. Like I said, they're 38-16. The main reason why they moved back up to 2 in this top 5 and worst 5 is because they did just finish beating Cleveland last week, and they beat Cleveland in Cleveland by 7. So currently, the season series between the Celtics and the Cavaliers is 2-1 in favor of Boston. They do have their last season meeting, I believe, at the end of this month. So we'll see if Cleveland's able to even it back out and finish the season series even at 2. But for now, Boston has a lead, so I had to move Boston ahead of Cleveland into the number 2 spot. So, of course, coming in at number 3, I got to give it to the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavaliers are 43-10. Now, the Cavs did have a little bit of a dip in the last month or so. You know, they went the longest without losing a game to start the season. Then, even after they did lose some games, they went on another streak. They were beating a lot of the top teams. They beat Boston. They beat OKC. But then things started to turn around. Boston beat them. OKC beat them and beat them badly. And they've kind of just been like getting their feet back together. They've had some really close games. Darius Garland hit a late 3 from like just inside half court for a game winner last week. So they've been playing some tight games, but still deserve to be in this 3 spot. One thing about Cleveland is they can definitely score. They are second in the league in points per game. Right now they're averaging 122.5 points per game, which is just crazy. Like if you would have told somebody from, I'd say, 10 to 15 years ago that there's a team scoring 122 points a game, they'd be like, what is going on? But that is the game in today's age. People are finding it very, easy to score, especially with the 3-point game being such a huge part of it. Way more attempts from 3. And with Cleveland's size, they not only have the 3 ball, but they have great rebounding, and they're able to move in and out and score a lot every single game. Now bringing in at number 4, this might surprise people, but I got to go with the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers are currently 32-19. Now the Lakers have the best 10-game stretch currently in the league. They are 9-1 in their last 10, which is somewhat surprising, especially with the whole huge trade ordeal. Everybody knows the big news with Anthony Davis leaving and then replacing him with Luka Doncic. Then they had a trade where they were trading away Dalton Connect, but then that trade fell through because the player they got from Charlotte, Williams, he didn't pass his physical. So now Connect is back on the Lakers, which honestly I think they should have kept Connect in the first place. I think especially with Luka and LeBron being such ball dominant players who can get to the rack, you need guys who can shoot. And Connect, I would say, is probably one of the best shooters on the team. So I think his skill set is valuable to the way this team is going to be constructed. I get the idea that they needed another big. They did just recently sign another big, so I think that'll help. There's also rumors about Williams potentially being cut and then the Lakers signing him as a free agent. I don't think that'll happen. I don't even think the league would let that happen because it'd be like cheating, so to speak. So, but nonetheless, the Lakers have looked good. They've beaten some good teams, including one of the teams that is also going to be in this top 5. They just beat recently and beat them soundly. So they deserve to be at number 4. And as Luka gets acclimated to this team and to this offense, we'll see if they continue on this winning streak and keep rising up the rankings. But for right now, I do believe they deserve to be at number 4. Now coming in at number 5 is one of those teams that I mentioned that the Lakers recently beat. It's the New York Knicks. Now the New York Knicks are 35-18. They've been playing well. They've been playing well pretty much all season, but just like most teams, they kind of had a wave of down and then came back up. But overall, the team chemistry seems to be great considering, the trades they had before the season started. Brunson is still being dominant, leading the team in every way. Right now, Brunson is averaging just under 26 points per game and just over 7 assists per game. So when your leading scorer and the leader of the team is averaging 26 and 7, then your second player, I believe, Cat, is averaging somewhere around 24 to 25 points per game. So dominant scoring, great feel for everything, and they're definitely going to continue to be a problem in the Eastern Conference, and should be interesting to see how it is going forward. Now to get into the worst 5, obviously to start it off at 26, I got to go with the Philadelphia 76ers. Now the 76ers were at the bottom in the very beginning of the season because Embiid wasn't playing. Then he came back. They went on a run. They got out of the bottom 5. Now they're back to the bottom 5 again. They've been losing way too much. Their current record is 20-33, and surprisingly, they have the second longest losing streak currently in the league, which is 4 games. Which obviously, 4-game losing streak isn't astronomical. It happens, but it is the second longest losing streak currently, so that's not a good look. They have a big game coming up today, actually, against another one of these teams that'll determine if they're going to stay in this bottom 5 or they're going to move out of it, but they definitely got to get it together. I know overall the season is long, but we're already past halfway through the season, and there's no way with all the acquisitions that Philadelphia did in the offseason that they would have predicted them missing the playoffs. But as of right now, that's exactly what would happen. So they got to get it together so they can make their way into the playoffs. If they were to miss the playoffs, it would probably be the most disastrous season ever in the history of a team, considering the expectations going into the season. Now coming in at number 27, I got to go with the Utah Jazz. Now Utah is 12-40. They've been in the bottom 5 all season. As I kind of mentioned in previous episodes, they're probably going to be here all season. They're not really geared to winning right now. They're kind of just like gelling together, and I think the front office is trying to position themselves to, make a big boost next year to where they can be more of a contender. I don't know if that's going to help, but as of right now, they deserve to be at 27. They actually have the 3rd worst points per game allowed in the entire league. So it's really hard to get out of being a bottom 5 team when essentially everybody can score on you with ease. Their defensive presence needs a lot of work, and I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. So, of course, that's why they're at 27. Now, at 28, I'm going with the Charlotte Hornets. Charlotte is currently 13-38. Charlotte was the team that I mentioned that was involved with that rescinded trade with the Lakers where they were expecting to get Dalton Connect. Kind of sucks for them because the same way I said Connect is necessary for the way the Lakers play, Dalton Connect would have been a great addition for Charlotte because Charlotte is terrible at scoring. They actually have the third lowest point per game average during the season out of every team in the league. They're only averaging 106.6 points per game. Like I said, it's the third lowest in the league. Scoring is vital, especially with the way that teams score nowadays. Averaging 106 points per game is not going to get it done. So that's why I said Connect would have been crucial, having that extra shooter, somebody who could put up buckets on a regular. But now they don't have him. And now the player they did get back says that he doesn't want to play. Who knows how this is going to shake out, but definitely not looking good for them. They'll probably be another one of these teams that stays in the bottom 5 all year. Now coming in at 29, I got to go with the New Orleans Pelicans. The Pelicans are currently 12-41. The Pelicans have just been awful. They currently have the longest losing streak in the entire league at 9. That's right, they've lost 9 straight games. You know, they did just recently have a trade right before the trade deadline, so the idea is that this was going to create some sort of change. Maybe it has, but it's not for the better. So it's amazing considering all the talent and personnel they have. I got to look back, but I think I might have had this team making the playoffs in my preseason predictions. And right now they're one of the worst teams in the league. They got rid of Brandon Ingram, so I don't think that's going to change. I don't think they're going to find a way to make it back into the playoffs. Even if Zion is 100% and plays every single game the rest of the season, it just doesn't look like they have enough to get it done. They're definitely going to have to really look into changing everything, maybe even trading away Zion to, start a rebuild. But nothing is working right now, and they deserve to be at this 29 spot. But thankfully for them, they're not last. And why is that? Because there's a team that I've mentioned before is the worst run organization in the entire NBA. That is the Washington Wizards, bringing in the rear at number 30. The Wizards still have the worst record in the league, which is expected. They're currently 9-44. So they're the only team that hasn't at least gotten double digits in wins so far. Now, granted, they've been winning more recently than they had in previous time periods, but that goes to show you just how bad they are because they've won, I believe, like 3 games in the last 2 weeks or so, and they're still 3 games away from the next team in terms of wins. So they're still pretty bad. They still deserve to be at the bottom at 30. They are essentially the opposite of OKC, not only in terms of ranking between first and last, but I talked about OKC in terms of their point differential being the best. Well, guess what? Washington's point differential is the worst, and it's almost even to what OKC's is, but in the opposite way. So their point differential for the season right now is negative 13.6. So that means every single game, on average, they're losing by more than 13 points, which includes their 9 wins, factoring into that, which obviously in those games, they're not behind. So that goes to show you how bad they're losing. It's like not only are they losing a lot, but they're losing by a lot when they lose. So, again, I'm going to keep reiterating it. This team will probably be in this spot for the rest of the season. Even after the trades that they did, I believe they traded away Kuzma. I don't think it's going to make a difference. This team is terrible. So, that wraps up this segment. That also wraps it up for this week's episode. Thank you all for tuning in. Please make sure you like and subscribe and share wherever possible. I also wanted to mention that going forward, now that the NFL season is over with, instead of having episodes twice a week, they will now be scaled back a little bit to only once a week, seeing as how the main focus right now is going to be the NBA, and we will continue to move forward from there. So again, episodes will drop once a week, probably anywhere between a Thursday and a Saturday. It'll just kind of depend what works best, but that's what you can expect looking forward. Again, I appreciate you all for tuning in. Thank you. Peace.